Hey everybody, Ham Solo K0FYR. So I have been holding off on this video, wanted to get a bunch of other stuff done. And this is more of just a response to apparently a sad ham. And so this is one of the first times that I've had to respond to something like this. I know a lot of the other YouTubers get this more often than I do. But this one kind of stuck, and so I knew I wanted to do a response, but I was holding off. So let's see what this sad ham has to say, and then I'll give you a nice response on it. So stay tuned. All right, so I had done a video, probably 2-3 years ago, something like that, on GMRS frequencies, and then I started to talk about the difference between narrow banding and wide banding. And so did the video. I believe that one shows it on a spectrum display, the difference between the width, probably 25 kilohertz to narrow banding at 12.5 kilohertz. So when I was finished with it, I had this guy reply 9 months ago, so a couple years after I'd even done the video, and it said, so should I assume that narrowband has better penetration than wideband since the signal isn't as wide? Question mark. I mean, it would make sense because I don't get near the penetration with 2 meters as I do with GMRS around and in buildings. And of course, we all know the reason why, period. But I never thought about this between narrow and wideband. Simple question. And the way I do my channel is, I'm here to talk about my ham radio journey and help people that may be on theirs. And so I am always going to go to the lowest denominator. Maybe I have people that don't even have a license yet. Maybe they don't have a GMRS license. Maybe they're just interested in radio itself. And so I want to respond and say, talking to those people, describing what's going on, maybe get a little insight to what's happening. And so I replied 9 months ago. Actually, GMRS has better penetration because it's UHF frequencies in the 462 megahertz region. 2 meters in the mid 140s doesn't have the same penetration, and it's due to the waveform. The true reason they narrow band is to fit more channels in the same amount of space. You can get 2 channels narrow band in the same space as 1 wideband channel. Ham Solo K0FYR. That's how I responded. I got a email response from this guy that I'm going to put up here on the screen so that you all can see. But basically, he says, okay, if you go back and read what I said, you will find that you just repeated what I already said. Not sure how you missed it. That wasn't the question. I'm well aware that GMRS has better penetration than 2 meters. I also know the reason why. If you could look at the picture between the two, GMRS is much more narrow signal frequency, thus creating more penetration. Now, distance-wise, in the open, the 2 meter signal frequency will travel twice as far. Now that we have that out of the way, and you are actually reading what I'm saying, and being busy, being a Mr. Know-It-All, let's get back to the original question, of which I already know the answer and knew the answer when I asked. Getting back to wideband versus narrowband, since the signal frequency travels through objects better on GMRS than 2 meters, for the reasons stated above, wouldn't it penetrate even more on narrowband because it makes the signal frequency even more narrow, which was proven on your spectrum? Question mark. It's really not that hard to understand. I understand what narrowband is and how it fits more in the band, filling in the gaps. My question has absolutely nothing to do with that. I mean, you obviously didn't read my question at all. I plainly stated what you just repeated. Wow. You know, some salt there. All right, so you want to go ahead and be a Top Gun? I will answer you in kind. All right. So I did 10 years in the United States Army, and during that time, we used the Prick 77 radio, which operated 30 megahertz to about 75 megahertz. Used it many times in the field, and then we switched to Singars during the Gulf War. After that, I got in the fire service for 25 years, and I used emergency radios nonstop. Every shift, every day that we were there, that's what we used. And we're in the 7th largest city in the United States. We're running about 1,000 runs a day, just fire and EMS. And so when using those radios, when we first started out with VHF, we found that it started to get very crowded and we weren't able to penetrate buildings. And so the majority of the fire service moved over to UHF, and we operated in the 450 megahertz range. Why? Because we could narrow band, and in that limited frequency range, you were able to put a whole bunch more signals in there. As that got over congested, then we went ahead and moved to 800 megahertz to do the same thing with more frequency space. When that started to get filled up, then we've also moved into the 700 megahertz area for the same amount of individual narrow-banded frequency space. Did it change propagation in the buildings? Yes, because those higher waveforms, UHF and above, allow it to penetrate the building. Has nothing to do with it being 12.5 megahertz. You still have a carrier, you still have 2 sidebands. They're just less of them, so you can put more signals side by side and have more available frequencies for people to use. Now, if you were to run 1,000 medical and fire runs a day, you would know that, man, it can get pretty congested. And so that is the whole reason why. So when the FCC issued the regulatory context, it said, for Part 90, which I will put on the screen, business, public safety, and industrial users, the FCC mandated a transition to narrowband starting in 2013 to increase spectrum efficiency. It has nothing to do with penetration into the building. It is because you can put more signals side by side. That's the whole reason. If you want to go and try to test it to see if you get better, where there's no way for you to know if the signal is better narrow than wide on 450 megahertz, go ahead and try. Tell me the meter that you're using to do that, or how you're guessing that it's working more. Because when we're in the sub-basement of a building on fire and we're trying to get to the 14th floor, even sometimes that doesn't work. And so we have to go to talk around channels, which would be the simplex side, and only be able to communicate, because guess what? Even narrow-banded, we couldn't get out sometimes and hit the repeater. Why? Because that's not what it does. It only allows more frequencies to be in a space so that we can use more. It's because we have PD, have their own set of frequencies, and gas collection, and public schools. And so when those get congested, they narrow band in order to add more. Has nothing to do with penetration. ARRL says amateur radio services are generally exempt from this mandate and continue to use wideband as the standard for most analog FM repeaters. Well, we're not talking about FM repeaters. We're talking about UHF. However, some coordinated repeater systems in congested urban areas may transition to narrowband to accommodate more users, not to penetrate more, in order to have more users, because you have more areas for people to fill. You understand now? I did read what you said, but that has nothing to do with what I was talking about or trying to impart to the other people that watch this channel who may not know. So appreciate you watching. This is Ham Solo, K0FYR 73.